Good evening, everybody. How are you? Excellent, excellent. It is really, really exciting to be here today. Not only did I get a chance to meet some really interesting people, but I got to bid on some really cool stuff. And you guys have done a great job in putting those silent auction items together, so well done. My day started really early this morning. I got home late last night from Toronto, and I set my alarm for 4 o'clock this morning because I wanted to be able to practice and get ready for what the day was going to bring. And I felt a little bit tired. So I drank a whole lot of coffee, and I put on my shoes. These shoes make me feel fabulous, and everybody should do something that makes them feel great. So I got to the first event that I had this morning, and it was actually called Power of the Purse. And we were at the Atlantica Hotel, and there was no parking. So I drove all around Quinpool Road and parked about 20 minutes away and walked in these shoes. They didn't feel so happy after that. But anyway, I've had a really great day, and then coming here and seeing all of you, there's something about being in a school and in a university that I find really exciting, whether it was going back to elementary school or my time at Mount Allison or to my time during my MBA. There's something about a center of learning that is really, really exciting, and you guys just have not disappointed. The other thing I think is really cool is that I get to talk about a couple of my favorite topics. First of all, I'm going to talk about leading and learning, and to do so at an institution like the Mount, that it really is recognized and known for their support of women. For me, that is just an added bonus, so thank you for the opportunity. The other thing I think about is all the leaders in this room and all the leaders in our city. And I'm really humbled to have been asked to share my story with you, so I do hope that I will live up to your expectations, and I thank you, Sandy, for the opportunity. So, I think I always knew that I wanted to be a leader, whether it was as a student or a young child. I was kind of that organizer. I was the child who was a planner. And whether it was by design or something that just kind of happened, I was that person. So at the age of 8, I was the child that developed a newspaper and got my dad to photocopy it, and I delivered it up and down the street. By the time I went off to school, I was the president of the student council, I was the treasurer of the student council at one point, editor of the yearbook, leader of the social committee. I think maybe at the end of the day, I was probably the bossy one. And maybe that's how I got to be in leadership. But I prefer to think that I'm not bossy. Those are leadership skills, right? So, while I knew that I always was going to be a leader, I don't think I always knew that I wanted to be a banker. I grew up in New Brunswick in the 1980s, and I graduated from high school in 1992. And back at that time, it was really most prevalent to talk about women and sciences. We hadn't even thought about women and technology, and we certainly hadn't really done a lot of talking at that point about women in business. So throughout my high school career, I did chemistry and physics and calculus and biology, and you name it, I had taken it because you needed to leave all of your options open. And I got to grade 12, and I'd completed all of those options, and I had an opportunity to take a law course. And that was kind of a pivotal moment for me, because what I found is that I really liked being part of a team. So we took part in what was called a mock trial. And I loved being part of a team. I loved learning to ask some of those really tough questions. I liked building a case. And honestly, I think I've always been a bit of a law and order junkie, so this really was right up my alley. So it was during this time that I met a gentleman who coached our mock trial team, who later went on to become a judge on the Court of Queen's Bench in the province of New Brunswick. And he said to me, you know, you really should think about a career in law or something in business. And I said, yeah, you know, I can see why you might say that. That would be appealing. But I was a woman in 1992, and that if you had the marks, you did a science degree. So I started at Mount Allison University in a Bachelor of Science program because that's just what you did, and especially if you were a woman. And I ended up changing, and very quickly into my time there, into the Bachelor of Commerce program. I found business was more intuitive. It kind of fit with what I liked to do. Maybe it was when I discovered I was going to have to spend every afternoon in the lab, and spending every afternoon in a group meeting was a little more appealing. But whatever it was, I switched my major into a Bachelor of Commerce program. So when the recruiting team from RBC came to campus, I met a lady who was the branch manager of our Sackville branch. Her name was Sue Clark, And I've worked with her a number of times over the years, and today she actually works at our RBC Dominion Securities office, where she's a vice president. So at the time that I was kind of looking at what options were, I had actually accepted a position with KPMG, an accounting firm. So I was a marketing major, and an accounting firm wanted me. So they were really aggressive in their recruiting. They had a really good brand. They were writing paychecks. It sounded really good in 1992. So why not? And I guess I was probably really flattered by the fact that they wanted me. So at the same time at Mount A, I was a student member on the Board of Regents, and I met a gentleman there. His name was Covey, and he will always be Mr. Covey to me. Some of you in the room are nodding. You probably know of him. And at that time, he asked me, he also sat on the Board of Regents, and he asked me what I was doing after graduation. And I very proudly told him I was going to be an accountant at KPMG. And do you know what he said? Well, that's too bad. Wow, I was taken aback. So I didn't know what to say of that. I don't remember at the time having much more of a conversation with him. I stepped back and thought, okay. But that conversation really stuck in my head. At the time, I don't even think I knew who Mr. Covey was. I knew he worked for RBC, but I really didn't know who he was. So I found out who he was, and I called him in Halifax. And he returned my phone call on the dorm room phone. There are some of you in the room that remember dorm room phones. So picture it, it's 1996. We are not particularly wired up at Mount Allison in 1996. It was in 1996 that I actually first heard people talk about the World Wide Web. Wow. So we had a phone booth in the residence, and it was basically a closet that had a phone in it. You still see some of them around. I think they still cost $0.25. And whoever lived in the room closest to the phone booth typically answered it, although they then wanted to move far away from that room in the future. And then they would yell down the hall, "Alisa, the phone's for you!" And you'd come. And they'd leave the phone dangling, hanging there, waiting for you to come. So it was in that dorm room phone booth that I actually spoke to Mr. Covey, who turns out he was the regional president for RBC in Atlantic Canada. Can you imagine what he thought of that? But I actually knew his son. His son went to Mount A, and Mr. Covey had gone to Mount A, so he probably knew all about phone booths. But there I was in that phone booth with the door closed, sitting on the chair, and I said to him, "Mr. Covey, what did you mean?" And he says, "Well, what do you mean, what did I mean?" I said, "When you told me that that's too bad, what did you mean?" And he said, "Well, Alisa, I think you're a real people person. And I think you'll be really bored if you become an accountant." I thought, oh my goodness, well, that's way more challenging than I had thought. I'd never really thought about that before. I was good with numbers. I did have people skills, and it was something I enjoyed, but it wasn't really something that I thought of as being a bankable skill. And he just thought that was crazy. But back then, in 1996, universities were very academic. There weren't a lot of experiential learning programs, certainly not at Mount Allison. Work-integrated learning was not very common. And so I just didn't realize the skills that perhaps I had, as opposed to the skills that were right in front of me. So I asked him, what did he think? What should I do? And he said, "I think you'd be a really good asset at RBC." Well, I didn't know what that meant. I knew I was good with numbers, and that sounded like that might be fine. But he thought it really had more to do with being a people person. So he set me up with a recruiter, the head of HR, a woman named Marie Goyer in Toronto. And again, in 1996, it's not like we could have a WebEx meeting, and she probably wasn't coming down to Sackville, New Brunswick. So I flew to Toronto, and I met her. And we had a really great dialogue. And within a month, I had an offer from the Royal Bank of Canada. Now, I didn't get an offer like you guys get offers today. I had it received by snail mail. At box M1070 at Mount Allison University, a box I checked every day after my 11:30 class. It was just part of what you did. I recently toured back through my alma mater, and they don't even have mailboxes that are set up like that anymore. But the whole idea of an offer letter coming by email or click to sign, that just wasn't part of where we were. So there I was. I had two offers in hand, one from the Royal Bank of Canada, one from KPMG. And I rescinded the offer from KPMG. And I thank my lucky stars every day that I did that. And I thank my lucky stars that a comment of one man could rattle me so badly that it changed everything. And it gave me the guts to pick up and find out who was he and what did that mean. But it changed everything for me. And it really awakened in me a fire, and a fire that has really driven me throughout the rest of my career. Really to challenge the status quo. What can you do differently? How can you challenge what's happening in, of course, a very constructive way? It taught me to really stand up for what you believe in and to strive to be your very, very best throughout all of your career. And it started my career with what I think is Canada's best company, and I'm really, really proud of that. Some might say I'm lucky. I guess if luck would have it and some determination and sheer people skills, yeah, I am really, really lucky. I know a lot of people over the years in my career who've had to change companies in order to find somebody that they could work with, an employer whose values and beliefs really aligned with their own. And that's never been the case for me. I've always felt a connection to RBC right back to that day that I walked into the headquarters here in Halifax at 5161 George Street, and to this day, 22 years later. I actually did leave RBC for a very short period of time. I was gone for 14 months. And it's not that I wasn't happy at RBC. I was simply at a place in my life where I didn't think I was mobile. I didn't see the possibilities or the opportunities, and networking came into play. So a gentleman I had worked with at RBC had gone to another company, and he said, "Oh, Alisa, you'd really like it here. It's really lots of upward mobility and lots of opportunity." And they wrote me a really big check. And I walked across the street for money. But what I learned over those 14 months is that money does not buy happiness. And I walked back across the street simply because the culture and the values that RBC has just spoke to my own, and I didn't find or see that elsewhere. And what is really, really important to me is that RBC walks the talk, and for me, that is just so critical. I like the fact that at RBC we encourage people to speak up, and that we encourage them to really have constructive challenge in an attempt to grow their mindset and to have continual improvement. One of the things at RBC that I'm really excited to have the chance to talk to you guys about tonight is from a corporate citizenship perspective. And I really like where our new RBC Future Launch program is taking us. So those of you that aren't familiar with the program, I do have a video I'm going to show you in just a second, but it is our $500 million commitment over the next 10 years to helping Canadian youth to prepare for the jobs of tomorrow. I do have a short video that explains it very well, and as they say, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video must be worth $1 million. So can we cue it up?
Something's happening across Canada right now. Work is changing. Around half the jobs we know today will soon be either drastically different or won't exist at all. That's why RBC created Future Launch, our commitment to improving access to programs, tools, and resources that empower Canadian youth for the future of work. Because while we can't predict the future, we can be ready for it. By 2020, 33% of all jobs will have different core skill sets, so we'll help young people gain new skills. In today's economy, 85% of all jobs are filled via networking, so we'll give youth opportunities to grow their networks. Right now, only 44% of youth feel prepared for work, so we'll give young people the chance to get real hands-on work experience. When Canada's youth succeed, we all do. And with the right tools and mental well-being supports, we know young people won't just be prepared for the future. They'll be ready to take on the world.
How inspiring is that? I love how it's so forward-thinking, and I love how it lines up to a much bigger purpose of creating a more positive future for all Canadians. It's also important for me to work for a company that is a leader, and not just because I want to be part of a winning team. Yes, I do like to win, but more so because of the nature of our business. Clients trust us with their life savings, and they trust us to help them make decisions that are just life-changing. They count on us to provide advice that will help shape some of the most important decisions they make, like do they have enough money to send their children to university or to future education? I was just reminiscing when I went to Mount Allison, the last check that I wrote, and a check, was for $3,000, and that covered my tuition in 1996. So the chance that we have today to provide that advice and help your parents to be ready and to plan, to really enable people to retire comfortably, those are the higher purpose of the things that we do. We help commercial clients to make sound financial decisions that not just impact their businesses, but impact their employees and the customers and the communities in which they serve. So I couldn't work for a company that didn't have an impeccable reputation or that was not perceived as a leader in the industry. And as one of the world's most highly rated financial institutions and most sustainable companies, RBC is committed to solid risk management, providing a good return to shareholders, strong consumer protection, leading-edge human resource practices and employee relations, and responsible supply chain management. And I couldn't settle for anything less. I also feel fortunate to work for RBC because it heavily invests in its people, and I am a great example of that. I think when I started, I probably had a few innate qualities. I was a people person, but RBC really invests in its people, and it's really invested in me. I absolutely needed development, and that is totally what the company has done for me. So to me, leadership is about a journey, and it's a journey that has no fixed or final destination, and I can tell you that, like any journey, the roads taken are not always smooth. But every patch of highway has a bump along the road, and at every bump there is a lesson. And a 20-year career and a 20-year story is way too long to cover in the 30 minutes that I have, so I'm going to share my top 10 list, kind of like David Letterman style. Now, there's only half of you in the room that know what I'm talking about. But David Letterman in my day was a guy that wrote top 10 lists, and he was quite cool. And today you might know him with a beard, and now he runs the show, My Next Guest. And if you don't know of him at all, then you should check him out on YouTube because it's quite cool. His first guest was Barack Obama. So I'm going to do Alisa's top 10 list, and let's start with number 1, the impact of change. So accepting and embracing change. They say that in the world is going to experience more change in the next decade than it has in the last 100 years. And honestly, I only have to look back in the last 6 months to a year. I've seen more change at RBC and in the financial services industry than I did in the first 10 years of my career combined. And you can feel the impact, whether you're just starting your career or you're thinking about retirement. The world of work is definitely changing. RBC just published a report, and it's called Humans Wanted, and there is a copy on your table. I'd encourage you to read it. It's based on 2 years of research, and the report indicates that half of all jobs in the next decade will be disrupted by technology and automation. And some jobs are going to change dramatically, and others are going to appear completely, only to be replaced by jobs that aren't even invented yet, which is really so cool. I think about this a lot because in my industry in financial services, it has really been impacted by change. So I look at my branches. Right now, I'm responsible for the 15 branches here in the Metro Halifax area. And branches are no longer places where people come in to cash checks, to transfer funds, to pay bills, because they can do that online. How many of you have even been in a branch in the last year? Oh, way more than normal. That's cool. And speaking of checks, who here has written a check in the last year? Wow, still way more than I thought it would be. You know what? We used to order checks every year. You'd go online, you didn't go online. You went into the bank, you ordered checks. They came in boxes of 250. And today, people don't order checks that often. And I have a pack of 100 instead of 250. And the only time I ever write a check is to do something with Nathan's school. And they don't even do the book order by check anymore. It's all done online. So I suspect my box of 100 are going to last until Nathan hits at least grade 12, which is at least another 10 years away. But I also think about change as a parent, and Nathan's going into grade 2. And it does not take a rocket scientist to know that the world that he's going to graduate into is going to be drastically different than the world that I entered in 1992. What's so interesting is seeing it through the eyes of a child. By the time Nathan was 2 years old, he could run an iPad better than I could. By the time he was 3, he had figured out how to download all those crazy apps. By the time he was 4, he was going around telling people, subscribe to his YouTube channel. And although he never has become a millionaire like some of those other kids that open toys and packages to put on YouTube, my kid does have a YouTube channel, and he had it by the time he was 4. And recently, he found his purchase finger. Yeah. That's a $100 mistake on my part that cost me in Minecraft downloads. So don't make that mistake. But he did all this by the time he went to school. The easiest way to become redundant is to become complacent and to resist change. And change is going to happen, so we just need to accept it. And more than that, you really need to embrace it. Technology is here to stay. I laughed like crazy because I was actually invited here to talk at a Women in Technology conference, and I thought, what the heck do I know about technology besides the fact that Nathan knows how to run an iPad? But no, you don't need to be a coder, but you do need to be tech savvy, and I can at least say that I've gotten that far. But what's so much more important is you need to be able to interact with people, both online and in person, and to be able to have those dialogues. Like I said, clients aren't coming into our branches anymore to cash checks and transfer funds, but they are coming in when it comes to making those big decisions. How do I fund my education? What do I need to do with retirement? How do I buy a home? And one of the leaders that I most admire has often said to our team, you know, those human empathy skills are still important, because you can't code empathy, you can't code caring, and it is always a human being that is going to take us those last 3 feet. And that part is just what I think is quite exciting. Adapting to change means that you need to be curious, invest your energy in learning and innovating. Take lots of courses. I always tell my team, don't just focus on the financial courses that are relevant to your job today. Try something new, something that you're curious about. When I look at resumes, I look for 2 things. One, I love people that have worked at McDonald's because seriously, they teach customer service skills and the ability to interact better than any company I see out there. And the second thing I look for is something interesting. Religious studies is one of my favorite, and sociology, psychology, something different. Because what I can tell you those students can do is that they can think creatively, they can think critically, and they can interact with people. So those skills are going to just continue, I think, to increase in importance, particularly as technology takes things over. I think it also means being ready to try new things. And many people think that the messages I'm delivering are for the older generation because today's youth have grown up with technology. And it might surprise you to know that some of our earliest adapters to the changes and the way things are going in the banking industry are people that were born way before the 1990s. And by the way, despite being tech savvy, not all of our young people are able to write a business email. You can't write LOL and put happy faces in a business email when you're talking to a client about a huge financial decision. But I see it all the time. So just so important, those people skills, and you'll see more about that in the Humans Wanted section. And I'm not picking on any one generation because the reality is that the skills that I'm talking about and that I've mentioned, they're critical for everyone, regardless of our age. So the bottom line is accept change, make the appropriate investments in yourself, and be ready to embrace the things that are happening. And by the way, accepting and embracing change, it's not just for people. Look at companies. Just ask Blockbuster or Kodak. Would they have done something different? Would they have evolved to meet the changing needs of their consumers if they'd been given a second chance? The next lesson that I have, number 2 on my top 10 list, is stay above the line. Did I miss that? There we go. Stay above the line. I think as children, we are born with a sense of wonder and creativity and an ability to see possibilities as being really endless. When I first came into Metro Halifax as the leader of our branch team, I was faced with a team that didn't see the possibilities and they didn't believe that opportunities were out there. I don't know why. They looked at GDP growth at 0.6 and I think they thought, yeah, there's no growth out there. But as Wayne said, this city is busting with opportunity. And I actually heard Mayor Savage speak in his address a couple years ago. He was talking about Amazon and how it could come here. And I'll tell you, I was so excited I walked away. And that night, actually, it was in December of 2017, I had taken my son to Phoenix Youth, and we were stuffing stockings to prepare for Christmas. And it's one of the things that we do each year. And Nathan helped, and I think he was only 4 or 5 at the time, and he did a little bit of stuffing stockings, but more than that, he ran around with my phone taking pictures. But what he couldn't wait to do when we were done is he was really big into playing Pokemon Go. You guys know what that is, right? So the GPS system, and you look on it, and you're looking for Pokestops, and he loved to find A, the Pokemon, and B, the Pokeballs. So we come out on Coburg Road, and we live in Dartmouth, and strangely enough, there aren't a lot of Pokestops in Dartmouth. I suppose that some of my community is a new community. It's not as developed, and maybe Pokemon just don't hang out there. But we walked out of Phoenix Youth on Coburg Road, and Nathan turned on the phone, and his eyes lit up. He said, "Oh my gosh, Mummy, there are a bazillion Pokestops here. This is epic." And he went on to say, "I'm going to call this place," we're just in downtown Halifax, "I'm going to call this place Pokestop City." So it was that night that I realized what a growth mindset was. And really, when you think about the opportunity of abundance, and it was so clear to me, the message that the mayor had delivered just that morning, that my son saw through Pokestops, through his little eyes, and the opportunity that was out there. And I went back and shared it with my team and said, you know what, we have to look at the opportunities out there with a growth mindset and see the possibilities, because it is abundantly clear to me that this city is busting. Many of us lose that growth mindset over time. I don't know if it's age or stress or some of the things that we maybe consciously need to really think about to stay above the line. So when I catch myself going below the line, and it's easy to do, especially when you're stressed, I play this short little video, and I'm going to get us to cue it up.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks, www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question. We are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
Where am I? Some really important messages for all of us, and life is just too short to be below the line. I take my responsibilities as a leader very seriously, but I try not to take myself too seriously. I want to be a leader that's seen as human and who's not just about the business. So I'm not afraid of a microphone. I'm sure that's a surprise to many of you. In fact, I actually like being in front of a microphone. When I was a kid, I can remember fighting with my sister to try and get the microphone away from her so that I could sing. And most recently, when I was leaving my current role, my team actually presented me with a sparkly microphone. So the reason for that is that when I first came into the role, we were struggling and we were really working hard on our digital skills. And the team was really kind of stressed. So I thought, well, how do I make this fun and kind of engaging? So I went back to my roots, and I came up with the song Olivia Newton-John. Yeah, not many of you know her either. Physical, let's get physical. Some of you do, you can picture it. So she wrote a song called Let's Get Physical, and I rewrote the words to Let's Get Digital. And then I put on my leg warmers and my headband, and I danced on video. So they all turn on their web conference, and I'm singing the song, I'm wearing my thing, I'm doing this crazy dance. And do you know what? It was just my way of saying it has to be fun. We can't take ourselves too seriously, and it's so important that we stay above the line. So that's why they gave me a sparkly microphone, because at the end of the day, I was pretty 80s and pretty way out there. And thank goodness they didn't all make fun of the fact that not only did I dance and go on, but I was also really out of breath when I had to then go on and deliver my actual message. So it was nice of them not to go there. Regardless, if you want to see the video again, and no, not the one of me dressed up like Olivia Newton-John, but the one about above and below the line, just search Above the Line, a key to conscious leadership. I find Where Am I a really great reminder. My number 3 is build your network. And how many people here have gotten a job as a result of your network? Yeah, because of someone you knew. You are not alone. If I hadn't had that interaction with Mr. Covey, I might not be at RBC. In fact, the research does show a clear connection between having a professional network and career success. 85% of all jobs are filled with networking. So by having a network, the right network, can be a bit challenging, especially for our young people. But there's some great tools out there. LinkedIn, 10,000 coffees, the Connectors program, which RBC very proudly supports through the Halifax partnership. And we also have a personal branding and networking workshop for students. So we're hoping that we can perhaps bring that here to you at the Mount, and Lori's going to help us with that. So just some great tools that are available. To me, the approach for networking that you should be looking at when you do look for a job, you should network just like you would going out to find a job. Be really deliberate and be very purposeful. So be often and be prepared, so be out. Determine who the 6 most influential people are in your community or in a room, and then figure out how you're going to connect with them. Ask some great questions. As I always remind my son, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and be that person that really helps others. What can I do to help you? Students, my advice to you is to start now. I see a lot of leaders in this room today. How many of them you introduced yourself to? It's a great opportunity. The other lesson I would have is to volunteer. I've been a volunteer for as long as I can remember, right back to a young child. And today I'm actively involved at the Mental Health Foundation in Nova Scotia. I'm a beaver leader, so I lead a beaver colony with Scouts Canada. And I can tell you that the connections that you make there and the lessons that you learn from working with a nonprofit are just invaluable. And to the leaders, look around you. We are in the middle of a war for talent. There are some bright, energetic students here who are full of great ideas, and they are our future workforce and our future leaders. So as the executive champion at RBC for Future Launch, I have another ask of the leaders in this room. Too many young Canadians are missing early critical career opportunities because of that no experience, no job cycle. And work-integrated learning experiences not only prepare them for the realities of the workplace, they give you valuable resume-building opportunities to meet the needs of employers. And it's a reciprocal arrangement. This summer in Atlantic Canada, we hired 26 students at RBC. I had 5 of them work here in Metro Halifax, and I can tell you the value that they added to my team just in asking new questions, delivering service in ways that we hadn't even imagined. It was really, really inspiring. So to me, not only is hiring a student an investment in our future, it's an investment in your company. And honestly, the energy and ideas that come with hiring a student are just so exciting. The next lesson I have is number 4, and that is that the road to success is rarely straight. Think long-term about your career, and remember the road is not straight up. In fact, there are a lot of U-turns. I was later in my career when I had my son. I was 38 when Nathan was born. And when it came time for me to come back from maternity leave, and I did benefit from the chance to have a year off, I went from being the regional vice president for one of our largest revenue generating businesses at RBC to a commercial account manager intern role. So at the time, there were a lot of people that thought I was really crazy. And maybe I was just a little bit, but I'll get to that part in a minute. But it was a role that really allowed me to achieve my personal and my professional goals. The truth of the matter was that the stress and travel that I was doing and the responsibility of a regional executive role wasn't going to work for me. So the intern role really turned out to be quite perfect. It was Monday to Friday, I didn't have to travel across Atlantic Canada, and it really filled in a gap in my resume. So the 2 business lines at RBC that generate revenue are our career sales force, which I had led until I went on mat leave, and commercial banking, and I had no experience in this side of the bank. So as an intern, and I had the chance to do this, I learned from the ground up. I went out with our commercial account managers, I worked with a mentor, I was dealing with clients, I learned how to very confidently structure some very complex deals, and I learned from experts in the field, so it just speaks to the value of mentorship. And I can tell you there is no way that I would be considered for the role I'm about to move into next week if I hadn't taken this step. But number 5, when you fall down, and you will, ask for help and get back up, and know that it's okay. So the decision for me to take an internship role was the right one, but it was a really, really tough one. That's actually 3 levels below where I was. I was a regional vice president, and I was coming in as an intern. Sometimes I still think about it as my swan dive off the side of a building. But it wasn't a decision that I actually came up with on my own. The reason that I couldn't manage the stress, the travel, and the responsibility of a regional role was because I was suffering from a very severe postpartum depression. And it was really, really bad, probably as bad as it could get. So here I was, I had this wonderful baby boy. He is the light of my life. And I couldn't get out of bed. I was just a mess. My marriage was a mess, my life felt like it was a mess, and I just couldn't see what might possibly be there at the end of the tunnel. So when my mat leave was up, I knew there was no way I could go back to work. So I called my boss, and I was going to quit. So my boss at the time was a really fantastic leader. He had high emotional intelligence. He was just really great. But he had a really hard time understanding how I, in his words, the strongest woman I know, could barely get through a sentence without crying. So the only option I could think of at that time was that I was going to quit. And that's almost what happened to me. I think it is what would have happened, but I took one last shot at what I might do and what I should do, and I called Kim Mason, who is our regional president at RBC. And that's probably a name that many of you are familiar with. Kim was here in Metro for a number of years. I didn't report to Kim, but I knew that she was connected, I knew she had high emotional intelligence, and I knew that she really liked me. And I won't lie, it was probably one of the hardest conversations I've ever had to have, but you have to make yourself vulnerable in life, and that's what I did. So it was one of the best conversations I had, and she told me I was crazy to quit. And I probably was at the time. I can smile about it now, but it took me 3 years to even talk to anybody else about this. Kim reassured me that things would look up, but I had to have a plan, and she was so right. And I reached out, got the support and help I needed, took a little bit of a step back and some time with my family and for myself. And she said, you know what, Alisa, here's an opportunity. In your resume, you don't have commercial banking experience. And to be the leader that I know you can be, I think you need it. So I took that gap and I took that step, and I guess what I would tell you is that the rest is history. Because I am a firm believer that the more you fall. And the more you get back up, the better you're going to be. And it always reminds me of that 1998 song. It was called Tub Thumping. It was by a British rock band called Chumbawamba. And it basically went, I get knocked down, but I get up again. Ain't never going to get me down. And that was kind of the principle by which I do live my life. Early on in my career, I met with someone in HR, and we were talking about the future and what did it look like. And I remember the lady asked me, well, what's your biggest failure? And here I was 8 to 10 years, I forget the exact date, and I hadn't had one. And I remember her looking at me and saying, wow, almost 10 years into your career and no failure? It's gonna be a big one. Well, she was not wrong. Because my breakdown or my postpartum depression was really the hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with. But it was a lesson in resiliency. And it helped inspire me to become an advocate for mental health. It's a passion I have today. I work with a lot of our employees at RBC. I work with a lot of people outside of RBC. And it's a passion that I'm going to have forever because I really do believe that with help, there is support and there is a future and an opportunity. The resiliency that I developed has really served me well many times since. And while the account manager role was definitely less stressful than the RVP role, that one wasn't without its challenges either. So as the leading business bank in the region, RBC really structures its business banking around different sectors. So when I came back into the market, I was a commercial account manager in the construction market. So I worked with builders and people that were constructing homes. So it might surprise you, but I don't do anything half-cocked. I go in fully prepared. So the first time I landed on a building site, I had my boots, I had my hat, and I knew my stuff. But despite that, in my time, and I spent 4 years in commercial in this market, I had 7 clients call my VP and say that they couldn't deal with me because I was a woman. So I know that's hard to believe, but it is entirely true. I was hurt. But more than that, I was mad. And so was my boss, and he thanked the clients for sharing with him their concerns, and he said to them, well, I'd be really happy to introduce you to another account manager at another bank. I was so happy. Not only did he support me, but I knew then that coming back was the right thing, and that support was really there. Now, when I was leaving commercial banking, I had another funny experience because one of those men that didn't want to deal with me said to me, oh, you're going to be really great. So I was going out to become an RVP and I was going to lead people. And he said, oh, you'll be really great at that. I thought, well, that's nice of him, thanks. And he says, I always thought you were kind of bossy. I'm not bossy, those are leadership skills, pal. So away we go back to that meme that has always resonated with me. Number 6. Surround yourself with a support network of people that will believe in you and make you uncomfortable. Like many leaders, I've had advocates or champions and people that saw potential in me. I think about a woman by the name of Wendy Bacon, who was the leader that called me once a month, every single month for 14 months, from the day I walked out to the competition to the day I came back. Every month, she reminded me about what I'd left, reminded me to think about my long game, and reassured me that there was a place back home at RBC. And in the end, I came back to RBC because the values and the connection that I felt, and I reported to Wendy for a short time period before she moved on, and then I replaced her as the VP of our financial services group. I think about a man by the name of Paul Miller, who I worked with really early on in my career. I was 21 years old. My first posting with the bank was in St. Stephen, New Brunswick, right on the border to Calais, Maine, the best Walmart shopping you can ever imagine. Paul Miller had fresh ideas, a genuine belief in people, and he gave really straightforward, common sense advice. So here we were in St. Stephen. I was 21 years old. I had a pretty good job in St. Stephen. I met a boy, I fell in love, and I thought I was going to stay there forever. But Paul said to me, you've got to get out of here. Get your Canadian securities course, move to Halifax, find a new boy if you have to. So I did, and with Paul's recommendation, the team in Halifax actually hired me. But I was terrified. This was brand new territory. I was in Halifax, the biggest city in Atlantic Canada, downtown core. I was working with professionals. I was 22 years old, and I'd never really done a real mortgage. So back when I joined the bank, we were still in a DOS-based environment, and we were just starting to convert into the Windows-based environment. In fact, I remember the first rollout of OS/2. And also at the same time, we were starting to introduce PC banking. And wow, has that come a long way. We just introduced our new mobile banking yesterday. And in 1999, we actually sent out to customers 7 disks that you could load onto your computer so that you could access your banking information. So I didn't know anything about mortgages, but I was pretty new at a university, and I knew some stuff about computers. So I struck up a friendship with a woman by the name of Patty Delahunt, and she taught me mortgages, and I taught her computers, and together we had a friendship that really helped develop both of us. And then there's Roger Howard. Roger's just wrapping up his tenure as our regional president for Atlantic to an executive role in national office. I was in commercial when the RVP of Metro Halifax came up. And I had no plan to put my name in and to put it forward. In fact, after what I had gone through, I probably would have just hidden out in commercial for the rest of my career. But Roger really pushed me, and he came to me and said, "Alisa, do you miss leadership?" And I was like, yeah, I liked leading people. And then I went on to give him 20 reasons why I could never be the RVP of Metro Halifax. Like, who even does that? Well, I did. And he gave me 21 reasons why those were the stupidest excuses he'd ever heard. And he said, "Alisa, you can do this." And he was right. Roger continued to push me, and not just for that role, but also because he saw me as a candidate for our regional operating officer role. And that's the role that I'm going to be assuming on November 1st, which, believe it or not, is just next week. The point of my stories here is that if Kim, Wendy, Paul, Roger, if they hadn't pushed me, if they just simply supported me or let me quit, instead of making me really uncomfortable, I wouldn't be where I am today. And being uncomfortable, I agree, makes you really uneasy in the short term, but I really do believe it's one of the places where the most amount of learning takes place. So I've had 13 different roles over the last 22 years. I've lived in 7 different cities, in 10 different homes. I've done all of that in Atlantic Canada, which I think is pretty fantastic, and I've had the chance to impact all of our major lines of business: retail, financial planning, career sales force, small business, commercial. So my advice to you is find opportunities where you get to manage change, where you get to lead through some uncertainty or do something really difficult. Put yourself in situations that you haven't mastered yet. I didn't know anything about commercial banking. I didn't even know if I could get out of bed, let alone be a commercial banker. But I put myself in that situation after I got some help, and that uncertainty just really, it breeds resiliency, and I guarantee that if you take those risks, they will pay off. I'm also a big advocate of mentoring. I've never actually had a formal mentor, but I've had lots of informal mentors, and those are the people that you seek out because you see something in them that just really resonates with you and you want to learn more. Interestingly, one of the people that's been the most tremendous mentor to me, I just had the opportunity to celebrate his 40-year career with RBC. His name is Jim White, and he retires on Wednesday. And over the years, he's one of the most common sense, level-headed, calm people I've ever met. And those are the qualities that I really appreciate in a leader. So over the years, I've sought his opinion hundreds of times. What did he think? What would he do? How would he manage it? And of course, over the last number of weeks, I've been bombarding him with every possible question I could before he leaves next Wednesday. The next one, number 7, is transparency and candor are key. And I'm really fortunate at RBC to work in a culture where feedback isn't just valued, it is encouraged. Feedback could be praise, it could be criticism, but the end goal is really to help people know what they need to do in order to get better. I think leaders need to present themselves in a very true, sincere, and consistent manner, and we need to know where we stand as people. But I can tell you there is a huge difference between those leaders that come out with what I call obnoxious aggression and radical candor. And the difference is care. And if you can be that person that really truly gives direct and honest feedback from a caring perspective, then I think you've really got it made. I've been fortunate throughout my career to have reported into some really transparent leaders who exhibit candor and really cared about me. Roger is just one example, and I really do strive to model those characteristics in my own roles. It's not always easy, but I can tell you it is definitely worth it. My number 8. A strong moral compass. We've talked about a number of leadership qualities so far. We talked about transparency, candor, openness to change, being above the line, where am I? Looking for ways to be uncomfortable, embrace risk, fall down, get back up. But leadership also requires selflessness, and leaders need to be able to provide that open forum. The answers are in the room, and if you step back and put your own opinions and thoughts behind and listen to the front of what your team has to say, and if you really establish buy-in by commitment as opposed to compliance, at the end of the day, I think that's one of the most important characteristics of a leader. As leaders, we hold elevated positions in an organization, and a great deal of trust is placed on us by the company and by our people, and employees will be guided by, and they'll model, and they will become and assume the values and behaviors of their leaders. At RBC, we call these the client experience activities and behaviors, and it's the emphasis that what you do and how you do it is more important than what you accomplish or what you achieve, because the activities and behaviors that drive our client experience are exactly what drive our business, and doing the right thing is at the paramount of being the most important. Number 9, work-family balance. Everybody wants to know this. I get asked it every time I speak in a group setting or I'm on a where it might be. Sometimes I do wonder if people ask that question of men. Not sure. Do they, Wayne? Yeah. Well, in any case, for some reason, as women, we are not as much. In any case, it always seems to be one that people are interested in, and I think it's because many of us struggle in finding it. Well, don't get too excited because I don't have all the answers. A friend of mine once said to me, the best advice I could give you about work-life balance is to be present. When you're at home with your children and your family, be at home. When you're at work and you're in an important business meeting, be at work. And try not to intersect or commingle the two, was her advice. I guess I prefer to think about them as work-life integration. For me, it's way easier said than done. I'm a single mom. I have a really busy and demanding job, and it is really hard to separate the two. So my Nathan always comes first, but that child has been to more RBC events than most of our employees. If I have to work on the weekend or on the evening, and I do that a lot, he comes with me. On snow days, poor Nathan, he doesn't just get to stay home and play on his iPad. He has to go with mom to all the branches and make sure people are okay. But he's really part of that experience. I recently took him to an event for Training Ground, and we were looking and working with athletes. And Nathan proceeded to get up on the stage and dance for 40 minutes. The more those girls, and especially girls, which he really liked, the more they clapped, the more he danced, and he was totally into it. I have another experience where Nathan and I do Beavers on Tuesday nights. And one Tuesday night, we were getting ready to go to Beavers, and my phone rang, and one of my branches in the city had been robbed. And when that happens, I have to go. So I had the dialogue, and the staff were kind of upset, and it's my job to go in and make sure people are okay and help to reassure them. So I said to Nathan, don't worry, bud. I'll take you to Shauna's house. She'll take you to Beavers. Mommy will be home after she's done at work. And Nathan pipes up from the back seat in his car seat and says, I'm not going to Beavers. There's no way I'm missing a real life bank robbery. So I took him. So by the time you get to a bank robbery when you're in my position, there's nothing happening. The police are there and they're interviewing people and they're talking. So the next day, so we got McDonald's and he spent most of his time hidden out under a desk. But the next day he told his teacher, yesterday I went with my mommy to a real live bank robbery. And she's like, what? And he said, they didn't catch the robber, but I found where the Royal Bank keeps all the best chocolate. It was a little boy's dream. Speaking of Nathan, I want to say a big thanks to the Mount. Sandy offered if Nathan wanted to have a seat at the head table tonight, and she even offered to feed him chicken nuggets if that would suit. Thank you for respecting my needs for Nathan to come first. As it turns out, he got a better offer. He got chicken nuggets and Netflix or video games, whichever he chose, with the babysitter at home. So he was really, really happy to do that. So that's 9 lessons, and I promised 10. And I couldn't end a keynote speech, especially in a room at Mount St. Vincent that really does have a special support, I believe, for women. So my final point, to borrow the tagline from last year's International Women's Day, is to continue to press for progress. So you're looking up there at that picture, and I'm sure you're wondering, well, my family hails from a little tiny town in Nova Scotia. It's called Sandy Cove. It's halfway between Digby and Briar Island, and if you blink, you will miss it. In the summertime, there are 500 people there. It's a little fishing village. And in the wintertime, there are 65 permanent residents. So in 2017, 15 women marched up the Sandy Cove Hill in the Women's March. And in 2018, 32 women marched up the Sandy Cove Hill in that Women's March. And the headline that night read, "Mightier Women's March in Nova Scotia Village draws international attention." Well, the international attention they drew was on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, where he joked about the small number of women in that march. And then The Late Night with Seth Meyers, where he joked about the other half of the town probably feeling quite awkward. Those women in that picture are my cousins, my aunts, my family. And to them, I say, press for progress. Don't let being a woman be what holds you back. Let it be the reason that you push ahead. Have confidence and continue to forge small and large gains despite the obstacles that are definitely in your way. Set lofty goals and be proud of what you have achieved because you're paving the way for others, just like those women. This has been the key to my professional journey, and despite the challenges that I've faced, and there have been many, one of the things that really kept me focused on the road ahead was just that desire to set an example for future generations, and especially for my son. Not very long ago, we had a little career fair at Beavers, and I heard Nathan tell his little Beaver friends, there's 20 of them, that his mommy was the boss of all the bosses at RBC. And do you know what was so super cool about that? Every one of those kids just nodded. That's cool. So I am not the boss of all the bosses at RBC, but this little exchange just gave me the confidence that everything will be different for this next generation, that they will not see it as unusual for a woman to be the boss of all the bosses, and that there won't be male or female-dominated industries, and that we won't need an International Women's Day to celebrate our achievements. It's a high bar, but I really do believe when I look out at the students in this room and I think of my son Nathan, I think it's one that we are definitely up to. So that's my story. I started as a teller in 1996, and next Wednesday I will officially assume the second highest role in the bank in Atlantic Canada. It still seems totally unreal to me. But it's the culmination of the experiences that I've had in Atlantic across all of our lines of business. And quite frankly, this has been my dream job since this job was created in 2004. I'm the third regional operating officer in Atlantic, so the third person to hold this role. I'm the first woman to hold this role in Atlantic Canada. And as one of my colleagues at a conference I attended last week said to me, "Alisa, you're also the first person not named Jim." The first two men were both named Jim. So I'm pretty excited about it. Will I mess up? Sure, I'm sure. Lori told me that I already have a few times. But with the leadership lessons that I've talked about today, I know I'm gonna succeed. All of my experiences, whether they've been good or bad, those are the things that have shaped my journey. And at the risk of sounding arrogant, and I do not mean to be, I'm pretty happy with who I am and how I've turned out and where I am today. I am the mom to Nathan, who is the best, cutest, sweetest boy you'd ever meet, and the best dancer in the world. I'm officially about to start my career dream job. I'm healthy, I have a supportive and loving partner. I've had the opportunity to meet thousands of colleagues, employees, friends, clients across all of Atlantic Canada. Many of them have become personal friends, which is something to a people person like me is really important. And I've got the business results to back me up. As I leave Metro Halifax next week, I leave it in the very capable hands of one of my dear friends and colleagues, Michelle Clare, and I do so knowing that it is one of the best, strongest shapes it's ever been in. Our most recent employee survey showed a 13-point increase, and that's in the engagement level of our teams. But what I'm most proud of is that team of people, and there are about almost 300 of them here in Halifax, volunteered 2,700 hours with local charities. And as a result, almost $250,000 was placed right here in HRM as a result of their efforts. But the most important measure is how our clients vote. And I can tell you that our client loyalty numbers have soared as well, because really the truth is happy employees, happy clients, and that does equal happy financial results. I can't tell you how proud I am of this team, and it really has been an honor to be their leader over the last 3 years. So at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, it's not all about the job. It's about the journey that got me here and the journey that I'm going to continue to take. It's about the lessons that I've learned along the way and the ones that are still ahead. And it's the challenges that I've conquered, and quite frankly, it's the challenges I don't even know about yet. And I wouldn't change any of it, not a second of it. I hope that some of what I've shared with you today will help you on your journey. And I really do wish each and every one of you all the best in your opportunity to learn and to lead. And thank you this evening.